Hey, all right. Hey, peace, everyone. Welcome to We Charge Colonialism Podcast and Book Club. This is Ikemba. I'm a member of the Public Relations Committee. Everyone want to introduce themselves?
Peace, everyone. My name's Tierney. I am the steering committee chair of We Charge Colonialism.
Hello, everyone. I'm Frank Maubat, chair for the Political Action Committee.
All right, so that's our team. Want to welcome everybody to another episode of We Charge Colonialism Podcast and Book Club. I literally just got in place, just drove from Philadelphia to New York. And so I'm happy I was able to be here on time. So, as we do every week, we like to give our weekly roundup. And today, just to give everyone a heads up, we're going to be reading from the Black Radical tradition, as Will was mentioned last week. So if everybody want to, there'll be a link for that so everyone will have access to it. And we'll be reading from section 2A or chapter 2A. And so, just get prepared for that. And again, just welcome for everybody that's tuning in. And so with our weekly roundup, we can go to Frank. You want to talk about what's in the news?
Yeah, what's in the news? So there was an incident in St. Louis prison compound, but there's an incident I've been going on since last year, December, so it's not something recent. But what happened here is like they have a bunch of people in detention. I don't want to call them prisoner because they are not yet prisoner until proven guilty. But the article says, prisoner, and stuff. But yeah, so since December of last year, the issue been going on and leading up to last week. There was an incident where the inmate broke out because they want a court date. So they just, they're keeping these people in there with no court date and no court, set time for them. So it's like, and there's no, good condition, being provided there, for them. So what happened here, these inmates actually got fed up and tired, and they begin to take things into their own hands. So what happened here, they ended up, letting fire to the facility, and then the next thing, what happened, they drove away. Like I think firefighter went there and turned the fire off, and it was all to go to another end. But what happened here, when they went there, they still, caused, because they're calling for attention, they still cause damage and stuff. So what happened here, there was a task force committee set up, and the task force committee that was set up, there was a reverend, again, they brought reverend in. There was a reverend and asking the state to set aside an independent, entity to look into the investigation. So, but the issue here is, why would they want to set an independent, institution to look into this issue when it is a state issue, when it is a state issue that have to deal, with lawmaking body and stuff. So why they left all these people out and then setting out an independent entity, setting out a task force, to look into these things. So that wasn't right, at all. That wasn't right. Again, it leads to where when you put state issue, into private company hand or private entity hand, that's where it leads to and stuff. So that wasn't right at all. So these inmates, I think they were right, because they are not prisoner at all. So they kept them there and making money out of them, making business out of them, and don't want to set a code for these people to actually prove them guilty or proving they're not guilty and setting them free. And they kept them in there with this whole COVID issue and no condition life being provided for them there. So they have to do something to bring it to lawmaking body attention, and that's what happened recently with St. Louis.
So for clarification, for people who have not seen the story, essentially they are people who are pre-trial, so they were arrested and are waiting for their trial. So these are not people who are even found guilty. These are people who the police picked up. They said, we have enough evidence on you, so we're going to take you to trial. And they're being held inside of these conditions during COVID, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a sad reality. You know, I see this a lot in my work. There's a lot of issues, particularly with COVID, and it really brings up the reality of the people, the way that the prison system works. You know, the whole idea of innocent until proven guilty. Like, what does that even mean? Like, whenever you're actually put inside of a jail until you can prove that you're innocent. So it's just one of the ways I think the American system is just a contradiction in itself.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, when I was listening to, I think it was the guy being interviewed. I don't know if it was the what do they call those people head of the prisons? It'll lose me, but it was a guy who was representing the judicial the prison, and he was talking about how these people who were rebelling didn't have any demands or anything like that. And so he was making it as if they was just rebelling for no reason, like they was just a group of uncivilized black men who didn't have no cause or anything like that. This is what the narrative was being pushed in the media. Mm-hmm. And so, as you was talking in the story, some of these people have been in prison for I don't know how many, for several months, haven't been charged with anything, just sitting there, haven't seen a judge or anything like that, which is a serious contradiction. So, to say that these people are just rebelling because they didn't have any cause. I mean, the COVID is one issue, but you have people behind bars, sitting behind bars unjustly. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's a major contradiction. I look at all of those people that's in there as prisoners of war anyway, because it's a major contradiction within this in American society that really pushes people to have to do things that is considered illegal by the state. They determine, you have the ruling class determining what's legal or not. But this is the same group of people who are looting our communities, bleeding our communities dry, where we are forced into conditions where we have to do whatever is necessary to survive. And so, them so much to say, but them just like they controlling the narrative was just like, come on now. These people have a cause.
Yeah, it's just the system in itself. I mean, it's just so backwards, the way that it operates. And like you pointed out, I mean, the idea that, you're just going to go into jail and wait for your time to prove that you're innocent. Meanwhile, you have all these Wall Street people who walking around enjoying the millions of dollars they stole from, everyday people. They cause an entire foreclosure crisis. And those people get to be decriminalized. It's very funny when you think about it, like the idea of white collar crime versus what is it, blue collar crime, essentially crimes that benefit the capitalist system versus crimes that potentially could threaten the capitalist system if it spills over into the white community. So, I wonder, like, what do you guys think about the movement so far, as far as people talking about abolition? Like, do you think it's working at all? I don't see any like systemic shifts, from that conversation, abolishing prisons and everything. It seems like a lot of good verbiage and people feel strong, but I don't see any real moves happening there.
Well, I would add, like, I would agree. I haven't really seen any no shift or the conversation. I think like the conversation is not even being had by those people who are in positions of power. To show that they have no intention on even entertaining that conversation. But any abolition that's going to take place is going to have to come through the force and the power of the people at the end of the day. And so it can't be, we have to get out of the notion of thinking that we're going to sit at the table with these colonizers and they're going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to abolish the prisons. We're going to defund the police, like, these things. And defund the police isn't even, a revolutionary act. You can argue that it's a start, but we have to go further than defunding the police. But I mean, I haven't seen anything that remotely looks like is we're going in the direction of abolishing anything. But that's like the state abolishing itself. And nah, I don't know if you think, what do you think, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to that, the thing here is it's quite clear the reason why they brought in an independent investigator when it is a state issue. It's clear that those lawmaking people, those lawmaking body, they are all part of, they have all share in those prison, institution. So that's why they make it private, and they have share in it. They have, the funds also go to them. They make profit out of it. So it's just like you coming to me and telling me, I should dissolve my business. My business is not right, and I should come to the public and tell the public that my business is not right when I'm making millions of dollars out of it. So how can you come to me to tell me, I should talk about my business where it's not right? So these lawmaking, people that have share into those businesses, they're not going to do anything to dissolve the whole prison compound or industry, or to even make it a state-owned and all of those things when they're making huge profit out of it. So it's not going to work. Like, for example, 2015, when I was working with the Senate in Harrisburg, I was on the floor because I was on a hearing committee. So I went on the floor. There was a hearing, and where they was giving the whole yearly budget about the whole prison, how they call it, institution in Pennsylvania. And they came to give a report how much they gained and how much they lost and what they should do to put more people in jail. And mind you, sitting there as a black man, these people were so confused and they couldn't really say what to say. And I can tell you, all eyes are on me like, what is this nigga doing here? I'm telling you seriously. Like, those that came to give the report, they were sitting and they saw me sitting there and I was taking report down. What's what they were giving. So they couldn't really go deep. You see, and they gave report on how much they gain, how much they lost and things, because these private entities coming to these lawmakers giving them report of how much they gain and how much they lost and how much what they need to do to recruit more people into the present industry.
Man, that's deep right there. Yeah, it's business. That's why I say we're prisoners of war, prisoners of capitalism in this country. So yeah, I appreciate that. That report. I think it's important that we do have these conversations around prisons, and you think about the amount of African bodies that are being put in these prisons to fuel this economy. It's ridiculous. It's something that needs to be overturned. So we're gonna move right along to the next weekly roundup, next report. I want to speak about what's taking place over in Africa, particularly how companies that are exploiting Africa for its resources are stationed in Dubai, whereas though in this report I read, they're talking about Dubai is the business capital of Africa, right? So the business capital isn't even headquartered in Africa. It's argued that it's headquartered in Dubai, and so it says growing numbers of Africa-focused companies are basing themselves in the Emirate, and just understanding that during colonialism, and we argue today that colonialism still exists. But what they teach in school, pre-independence, colonialism, Europe was where the money was flowing to, for the most part. And so today, money is still flowing out of Africa into Europe, but also into places like Dubai, where you have Middle Eastern countries and European countries still looting the continent of Africa. And I think with also, if you look at this article and you research what's taking place, you have Africans on the continent who are representing white power and blackface, who's like really facilitating this. They're expediting the looting and bleeding of Africa. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. So, you looking this article, it talks about how Dubai has become the business capital by default, and they've been setting up offices in Africa, because they don't have that connection being in Dubai. So what they're doing is setting up like these satellites in Africa to still be able to exploit it. So, I think it's important for us to examine this, because post-colonialism, what we're dealing with, as Kwame Nkrumah had told us, like the neo-colonialism is the next problem that we're going to be dealing with. I think Frank argued neo-capitalism last week, if you was here viewing that. But yeah, I just want to open it up and see what everybody thinks about what's taking place, in Africa with Dubai.
It wasn't surprising to me. I don't know if you guys heard. I mean, first of all, I didn't know Dubai was a place until probably like 5 years ago. I mean, that's my ignorance. I'm not saying that's something to feel proud about. But with that, like all of a sudden, like I hear everyone's going to Dubai, and I hear a lot of continental Africans being in Dubai. So it's not surprising, and unfortunately, our people, like sometimes we get into this trap where we think that anywhere but the West is fine, and so we'll be more compliant as long as it's not a white face on something. So whether it's someone in Dubai or someone coming from China or whatever, like will not have the same stigma. To me, like obviously we know that the biggest issue as far as colonialism is absolutely the West, but it doesn't come down to where you come from as far as whether or not you're an oppressor. It really comes down to your level of manipulation of the system that exists. So if we're really concerned about ridding ourselves of colonialism, we can't just be concerned with ridding ourselves with Europeans or ridding ourselves with the Chinese or whatever. We have to be concerned with ridding ourselves of the system, because the system is the thing that's jacked up. It doesn't matter if it's an African person that's benefiting from it or someone in Dubai that's benefiting from it. If the system is intact, then our people have no stand as far as, or have no chance to be able to benefit and recover from the horrible things that have happened to us already. So yeah, not surprising. I'm hearing more and more about a lot of continental Africans going to Dubai. A lot of people who they're said have bad business bills going over to Dubai. So I'd be interested to know more about what exactly is going on over there.
Yeah, it's just to add real quick, I wrote the article dealing with what was happening in Central Africa, and the Shalina Group was one of the companies that I was looking at as far as companies based in Dubai. I actually wasn't looking at where they were headquartered at, but doing the research, come to find out, Shalina Group is based in Dubai, and this is a company that we all should be aware of, because I look at them as like the modern day the Bears. During colonial period, we can out certain companies, looking at it in hindsight and saying, yeah, the Bears exploited, South Africa for their diamonds. But there's Shalina Group today, with the Cobalt, these are people who are exploiting the Congo. They're exploiting Central Africa, and the K Group is another one. But these companies being based in Dubai, I think it, speaks volumes of just how the money and the resources is just flowing to places that doesn't have the interests of African people at heart. But I saw you on mute, Frank.
Yeah, just to add to that, it is true that a lot of Africans actually travel to Dubai, and some of them go there for business purposes, and some of them go there to buy their product, and some of them go there for different other reasons. There are a whole lot of things going on in Dubai. African people go there to hustle. I don't really want to get into it or what they go do, and yeah, but it goes again to say, if we can't produce, and that's another thing. If we cannot produce, we will always rely on people. And to travel to Dubai is less cheaper, even it's less cheaper than coming to Europe or the United States and stuff. And if we can produce, that's another thing. We will always rely on people. We will always chase people if we can produce for ourselves. And we will not really understand the value of what we have. And what we have is just what it takes from us, and they go make it into finished product, and we run after it and go buy it and make them rich and give them the money. So that's just another thing, you know, not to go deep into it, what they go do in Dubai, but it's just another thing that I think our leaders, the African leaders, need to stand up and provide an environment for African people so that we can be self-productive and self-entertaining, so that we can, instead of running to Dubai, we can be able to run into African nations and do business.
Yeah, appreciate it. That's a fact. So I think this is another important report, another important analysis of what's taking place when it comes to the African experience today. So we're going to keep tabs on what's taking place over there as we move along, though, to the next report. Tierney, what you have for us?
All right, y'all. So I don't know if you've been seeing this. There's been some rumblings because Akon, remember he's making an Akon city in his home country of Senegal. Well, he's not only doing it there, now he's looking to start an Akon city that's going to be inside of Uganda. So this is significant, obviously, because of the year that Uganda has been having. So we know, obviously, that the current leader of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, he is very much a puppet to the West. He's been in power, I think, like something like over 3 decades. He was in power when Clinton was the president, when Bush was the president, when Obama was the president, when Trump was the president, and now when Biden's the president. All the while, he's been supported by these presidents. He's been supported by Western governments. He's someone who has no love for his people. He's only in it for himself. That's why we call him a puppet. All they have to do is offer him some crumbs, and he'll do the dance and do whatever it is that he has to do in order to remain in the good graces of the Western colonists. Now, he had an opposition, obviously, Bobby Wine, and we talked about him before. I'm not crazy about him because we know he also has affiliations with the West. This is not an issue of saying one person is the right way versus one person is the wrong way. It is an issue, though, whenever you look at what's happening with this person who has been maintaining power and very, very suppressive against his own people. And now Akon decides to go over to Uganda in order to start an Akon city there. So this is very much consistent with what we've seen about Akon in recent days, because we've seen that he has started a mining company in the Congo. And if you know anything about what's happening in the Congo, no person of real conscience can say, hey, I'm going to get into the mining business when they're using child labor or paying the people cents a day for something that's worth thousands of dollars that is in all of our phones and our computers and our webcams and whatever. So he's basically joined into that. He has a previous history of joining into the diamond trade. He even denied the existence of blood diamonds inside of South Africa. So he has a sketchy history. And this is just a reminder, I think, not to go too deep into it. It's a reminder that we as African people, we have to be very careful. The oppressor will have us rooting for people who are joining in with the conspiracy to undermine African autonomy, African independence, African liberation. I think Akon has shown over and over again that he is not an African for the people, he's an African for himself. And any amount of power that he can get from the fact that the continent is so exploited, the continent so weakened as far as allowing, stopping outside enemies from infiltrating and taking, he'll join in. So that's very important for us. I remember a couple of years ago, he did a deal with Africa. He said, I'm going to light up Africa. He's doing some electricity deal. Everyone was so happy when they heard about Akon City. Everyone was so happy, cheering, but no scrutiny of the situation that's happening on the ground. So I think this is something that's consistent with who he is. Anyone who's willing to join into the colonial system, I don't care who you are, you're an enemy to the liberation of the people. So that's really my thoughts on this situation. I don't know what you guys think.
That was heavy. That's all, I can say. But I appreciate, that report, because I don't really keep up with Akon, but I hear things in passing. Like some of the things you mentioned as far as like lighting up the city, the whatever coin he's doing. Like I hear these things in passing, but I don't really keep up with them enough to know like what the contradictions are. And what you just reported, that's probably news to a lot of people. That's why I appreciate these discussions. But yeah, I'm with that. It's like you can't be working with the enemy and be for the people, and few things you had raised as far as with the Congo, what's happening over there with the mines. I mean, they recently had people, and this been going on for years, but people digging cobalt with their hands, mining with their hands, things like that that's taking place. And so, you can't have any conscience and want to get involved in that type of activity in business. If anything, you should be over there fighting for humane conditions, fighting for those workers to have ownership and control over those mines. But but that's what I had to say. Appreciate it.
Yeah, let me just add to the contribution. You see, the most fearful weapon when it comes to the imperialists is Pan-Africanism. That's the only weapon they're afraid of. So the thing here is we should now begin to understand as well. Black leaders or Black entities who come out pretending that they are coming to speak on behalf of Black people, they are standing on behalf of Black people. We should understand that as long they do not have a strong Pan-African foundation or background, no matter what, they're not going to be for us. Because at the end of the day, they do not really understand the struggle of Black people. And that is Akon. Akon do not even have an understanding of what Pan-African is. But when he started his movement first, he came on air several times on several platform, media, Black media, and thing, and he started to speak. And it seems that he was going to do the right thing for African people. And at some point, he even criticized America. Like, look, America is a business. And, they run on the capital institution and thing. And I think African too need to take the same thing. And brand. He even said America, is a branding. So we African, if we want to succeed too, we have to take that branding as Africans. So he went this way, and we were too trusting, and we kind of followed him. But not knowing he was just trying to put his foot or his thought into the process so that he can have African support. Because the thing here is we have to get in mind that, if you want to, get into business into Africa, you have to get African support. And once you do that, and then once you get our support, you can move out and be part of the capitalists. And that's what Akon did. So in getting an understanding from what we learn from Akon now is, if we find Black people coming to speak on behalf of African people or Black people, we have to really get a solid understanding of, is this person a Pan-Africanist? If they are not, we can't follow that person. A true Pan-Africanist will never betray his or her people. We should know that.
I'm gonna push back a little bit against you, Frank, because to me it's deeper than Pan-Africanism. Technically, Pan-Africanism is anytime you have people from different experiences in the diaspora reaching together, to come together, so he can argue that this is Pan-Africanist. He could say, hey, I went to America, I got rich off of, the music that the African Americans started. I went to South Africa, I connected and got rich off of the South Africans. And then I went to Uganda. So I'm going all the way over around Africa. And I know that that's not the true meaning of Pan-Africanism, but I want to emphasize that because I'm noticing a lot of people using Pan-Africanism aside of a capitalist mindset. Meaning, I don't know if you guys see, like, it'll be on the internet, you'll see these business conferences. They're like Pan-Africanist conference. You see all these guys and they're shaking hands with all these, white men and everything who are going to fund, a Pan-Africanist project, meaning different people from different parts of the diaspora or whatever. Hey, you're going to come together. So this is Pan-Africanism. But we have to make sure that people understand Pan-Africanism is not just about coming together. It's about coming together to destroy colonialism and all of its vestiges, meaning the capitalist system that also has crippled us. As a result, of colonialism, that is a furtherance of colonialism. So I just think we have to not just, I understand that, you're coming from the mindset that Pan-Africanism means revolution, but a lot of people they're taking the term and they're flipping it and they're putting it inside of the business world. So we have to be clear. Pan-Africanism means destroying all imperialism, all colonialism, all neo-colonialism, and all exploitative practices that we have inherited as a result of those systems.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
That's it. I totally unite with what you said. Like, I don't think I can add anything else to that. But to say, for everybody that's viewing, this is what our organization is about. And so we, if you want to join, you want to get involved, and not just have discussions about the problems and just examine the problems and really want to develop practical solutions and destroy colonialism once and for all, so African people can be liberated people. Join We Charge Colonialism. Go to We Charge Colonialism, or email us at info@wechargecolonialism.org and find out how you can become a member. So right now, we're going to move into our book reading. We're going to be reading The Black Radical Tradition, and we're going to be starting at chapter 2A. I believe that's page 51, right? Or is there 57?
No, I think it says 1917, so 1917. I don't know if... No, page 50, sorry, page 50, you're right.
You scared me just now. I was like, what?
Yeah. So you want me to read? Because I know you stated something that's in the chat there.
Yes. So you can take on the reading.
All right. So again, we are reading from page 52A. It says what socialism means to us. So it reads: in the good old days, when cotton was king, chattel slavery was a flourishing institution. Not only the people who profited by the system, but most other, even those who were the sufferer, thought that this was really a law of nature, that it couldn't be otherwise. Nevertheless, chattel slavery has gone, but while it lasted, this was at essence. Certain human beings were compared to labor and the wealth which their labor produced went not to them, but to certain other human beings who did not labor at all, but labored in luxury, luxuriate on the labor of their slave. To date, followers suffer. They tell us that we are free, but are we? If you were to think of a moment, you will see that we are not free at all. We have simply changed one form of slavery for another. Then it was chattel slavery. Now it is wage slavery. For that which was the essence of chattel slavery is the essence of wage slavery. It is only a difference in form. The chattel slavery was compared to work by physical force. The wage slave is compared to work by starvation. The product of the chattel slave labor was taken by his master. The product of the wage slave labor is taken by the employer. Continue.
No, I think it's a good place to stop. Yeah, so when I hear this, so this is why, and I understand in our community we have issues as far as challenging, like when we say capitalism, because we've been kind of bred into this idea that what else is there? But when you understand what he's saying, that slavery, that was driven by profit, and what they were looking for was a way to maximize profit. And you look at what's happening today. You cannot look at Wall Street in the way that they treat Black people or Mexicans, the way that they treat prisoners. and not think that slavery ended. So when we're saying, we have to attack this capitalist system, what we're saying is that when you look at what's happening with these multi-million-dollar corporations, think about the fact that we were talking about the Congo and, cell phones. Everyone who has a cell phone, everyone who's on a computer, this is slave labor. It doesn't have to be a master and whatever. Someone's saying you have to work this low-paying job or else you'll die of starvation. That's slavery. So I think it's very important for our people to examine, why is it that slavery stopped existing? The reason it stopped existing is because they were able to transform. Racism doesn't just stop. Racism doesn't withdraw. Racism will only be willing to grant concessions whenever it finds another way that it can equally exploit people, equally ensure that their interests remain intact. And that's what we have today. So I think it's important for our people to have these conversations and really think deeply about why is it that slavery was able to end. Is because slavery is able to transform and to become what it is today. All of us struggling for a dollar that we can never control or never gain power from obtaining.
Yeah, I agree with that point. I was having the same thoughts going over this particular chapter in the beginning. It made me think, and I think you touched on it, but I'll just, give another perspective. But yeah, how we're just like born into a system, and we think like this is it. It becomes like a law of nature, quote unquote, a law of nature, because also that's what's fed to us, especially with capitalism. There's always this comparison with capitalism and industrialization to the way society was pre-industrialization and before capitalism, and let's talk about competition and so forth. And so people start to believe that narrative and think like, hey, there's nothing better than this. Look at how we were living before. And I think we get caught up in that, in that sort of fable, or lie, because we can transform this system and create something new. There was a time where, feudalism, people thought feudalism was the best system that you could have. People living under that system, they were living in Europe under feudalism for about 1,000 years. So what kept that system intact, for 1,000 years? People probably thought that there was no other way of living until someone came along and said, hey, this is how we're going to live now. And that sort of came from like the top down. Didn't even come from, at least initially, with the development of capitalism. So, I think it's important for us to understand that, this isn't a law of nature. And the system isn't working. For 600 years, African people have been suffering under this system. So why are we accepting this as sort of like, this is the best that we can do? Obviously, apparently, there's something wrong.
I seen a good question in the chat. I'm just wondering if you guys want to answer. Do you think it would be possible to put our money together and buy into the prison system and run it as a utopia to apply pressure on the outside from the inside? Frank, or you can go whichever.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, money is power. What we're discussing here about this whole issue of wage, and slave master and employee, where the name employee, how they call it, slave master, have been changed to employee. So at the end of the day, it's about the money. When you have that money, it's about who control. So it's two things: who have the money and who control the resources and who make decision. All of those things. I think we can do that if we put our money where our money will empower us. If we put ourselves into position where we can be able to make decision. Because I can tell you, we are not even making decision. The people that have the money, that control the resources, everything, they don't want to make the decision. So if we can put our money into where we can put our empower us and we can make decision, and we are in a position where we can control, and we are also in a position where we can distribute where we want to distribute it and where we don't want to. It will benefit. I think it will empower us and it will enable us to fight the neo-colonialists or in and out. So yes, I think that question That's the only way we can answer it. Put our money to where our money can empower us. But you cannot put your money to where your money is not empowering you. And you think you're going to gain something from it. At the end of the day, we will sit here, and keep talking and keep talking and keep talking. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna say, like, hell no. Like, we not investing in no prisons. Like, we about the abolition of the prisons. And I guess, like, what the sister is probably raising is using it, you sort of like trying to develop a strategy, put our money into it and control it and then transform it. I'm assuming that's what she's getting at, but I feel like we need to start focusing more on developing alternatives. Like, we're talking about abolishing the prison system and developing alternatives. So when we're organizing, like, we're not naive and saying, like, okay, abolish the prisons and just like empty out the prisons, and and today we're not even organized enough to be able to handle that. But as we're organizing, we need to be on the list of things that we should be focusing on and doing is creating those institutions to prepare us for the abolition of the prisons, for the abolition of the police. So how are we going to secure our neighborhoods? Maybe using transformative justice as an alternative as well, like just developing a different culture. And so as we organizing our people, we're turning them into revolutionaries. And so they also have the mindset, we're talking about having a whole community prepared for these changes that's taking place, not just, a minority of us. But yeah, that's I have to say.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Kimba. So I think, when it comes, I think like there are hard things that we have to accomplish, and there are things to accomplish on the way. When I look at the hard things to accomplish, it's not just simple as taking over something, because we have to understand that the way that the system is set up to begin with is that the white man is always going to have more and never going to willingly comply. So for example, I'll give y'all an example. If y'all remember the NFL, they put out this announcement, we're going to have, what is the team? Was it? I don't watch football, y'all, but some football team, we're going to allow, a new owner. And what did P. Diddy say? He's like, all right, I got the money. I'm going to buy this, and this is going to be the change. Maybe we couldn't get Kaepernick, couldn't get him back on the team, but, maybe if we own this team, and then maybe he can hire Kaepernick, some type of thing like that was going around. P. Diddy, I think he was meeting with different people, different Black people, trying to get this team, and he has the money, right? But who has more money? The capitalists, the people who control it, and who has the more power in the situation, the people who control the system. And ultimately, I haven't heard another thing about that. I think that was just a small example of the fact that, yes, we can have Black people who can make money in this system. We can have Black people who might even be able to build some things. But when you're talking about real power, the ability to push systems, alternative systems, that doesn't just come from getting enough money to pull together and take over. That comes from revolution. And I think we can't be afraid of revolution. Revolution means take it all from the top to the bottom. Revolution is something that's it's really an all-encompassing activity. So I focus more on those things rather than the things that our people have focused on of coming together, try to take over something where, the person who wrote the rules of the game, they're always going to make sure that they are the ones who benefit in the end. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. Political education revolution, organizing, will take off forth. All right, so let's go ahead. The United States government has made a study of the wealth producing power of the wage slave and has shown that the average worker produced $2,451 a year. The government had also made a study of wage in the U.S., which showed that the average worker gets $437 a year. This means that the average employer take away from the average wage slave $2,014 a year. In the good old days, the master took away the wealth produced by the slave in the simplest form. Today, he takes it away in the form of profit. But in one respect, the wage slave is worse off than the chattel slave. Under the chattel slavery, the master owns the man and the land. He had to feed and clothe them. Under the wage slavery, the man feed and clothe himself. Under the chattel slavery, it was to inherit of the owner to give the slave work and to keep him from starving to death. Under the wage slavery, if the man goes out of work, the employer doesn't care. That is no loss to him. And if the man dies, there are millions of others eager to take his place, because, as I said before, they must either work for him or starve. Go ahead, continue.
I think it implies, Ikemba, I called you my son's name. You want to go first?
Yeah, that was heavy as well. Like the transition from chattel slavery to wage slavery that we still have today, I think is important for us to have that conversation and to expose that contradiction, because many people they look at slavery as a thing of the past because of this modification of the slave system. And so the relationship that we had with the slave master pre-Civil War, that relationship, that power dynamic still exists today. I was recently looking at this. I was doing some research and just looking at wealth distribution in America. And today, white people control 86% of the nation's wealth. African Americans, Black people control 4.1% of the wealth. In 1990, this is 2020 I'm talking about. In 1990, whites controlled 90% of the wealth. So there's no real change taking place. And the people who are gaining more and more wealth in this country is the ones that's considered like others. So, if you look at how much wealth did white people control during slavery, if not 100%, it had to be, close to 100% of the wealth in this country. And much hasn't changed since then. So I think that's what, because when we're talking about controlling the means of production, you're controlling the livelihood, you're controlling the life of the people who are dependent on the means of production, on the land and on the resources. As Malcolm said, land is the basis of all independence.
Yeah, you hit right where I was about to hit. It's about power. Are people more in power? You'll have people say where we progressed. Progress has happened, okay? No, do we have power? That should be the only question we're asking. That should be the only thing on the table. Do our people have any more power than we had in 1960? Even if you consider power to be Black businesses, Black politicians, even there we have less power than we've had in previous years. So when we're talking about power, there is no progress. People will want to soften you and say, hey, we don't have plantations, anymore. We don't have slave masters. We don't have Jim Crow. No, do our people have power? That should always be the thing that we point to anytime anyone tries to distract us with any other type of benefits that we've gotten from white supremacy.
Yeah, and before I continue now, let me just give a statistics here. This is from MSNBC. It says here 1968, Black homeowner was 41.1%. 2018, 41.2%. Is there any improvement? And then Black incarceration, 1968, 104 per 1,000. And then 2018, 1,730 per 1,000. Per 100,000, let's say. And then Black unemployment, 1968, 6.7%. 2018, 7.5%.
Not much has changed. If I can add real quickly too, this chapter is deep, but like during after slavery too, you think about what took place, because it was an opportunity, like after chattel slavery, right? After the Civil War, there was an opportunity for this country to do something right. It was an opportunity for like to make it equal for everyone, and they felt miserably at that, because white people made sure that African people in this country didn't develop the skills needed. As you know, we know like there was more skilled Africans during slavery than after slavery, because they didn't want them competing with white people. So you know, we built cities and towns, and they was destroyed by white people who, for whatever reason, looked at them as a threat, looked for any sort of pretext to do that. And the last point, just an example of what Africans were going through in this country. I think it was 1953, the Baton Rouge bus boycott, and this was prior to the Montgomery boycott. Actually, it was the like blueprint for the Montgomery bus boycott. But in Baton Rouge, there was an ordinance that put 41 black bus companies out of business, revoked their licenses, so that they couldn't compete with the municipal bus companies. So the city-run bus company, because they were losing revenue, they revoked 41 black-owned bus companies' licenses. So this is what we were going through as African people in this country. We weren't allowed to like really build wealth and compete on an equal playing field, and it's still happening today in some form or fashion.
I don't know if you guys seen the question that was put up on the screen. It said the Black Dollar had Madam C.J. Walker. It wasn't a question, it's a comment. The Black Dollar had Madam C.J. Walker living next to the Rockefellers. But I think we kind of get these ideas of people, historical people who have succeeded in capitalism. And we, like capitalism has taught us, you know, we look at these individuals. Those people are no way representative of the vast majority of African people. We also have to understand Oprah. She's an African woman. She's doing great, right? She has murdered Madam C.J. Walker. How would you feel if someone measured the success of our people by Oprah, who we know was not someone who's going to be the common narrative that's of what happens to our people, but she was an exception. We can't get distracted by the exceptions. There have always been exceptions. There have been people who had money, black people who had money in businesses in slavery. They were the exceptions. There were people in colonialism who were allowed to own businesses and allowed to work with a white man and have money. Those were the exceptions. So I'm not saying, you know, I'm not someone, some people completely write off the idea of the Black dollar having any power. I don't say that. I think there's definitely a benefit to our people, investing with our people, pulling together our resources together. But if you're trying to compete with the money that you get from our people, compete inside of the global capitalist system where you just heard almost 90% of the wealth is controlled by people outside of our community. If you're trying to compete inside of that system, then you have to be very realistic. Are you going to be able to compete against people who have the power? So concern about power, that's what I keep trying to enforce, you know, and power is not something for our people that we can measure by an individual. We have to measure it by the collective conditions of our communities. Because for every Madam C.J. Walker, I mean, how many horrible stories do we have of our people?
Right. All right. So I hope that person got a little bit of understanding of the comment. All right, let's go ahead. Okay, so I'm going to read this and then we can have a closing statement. Under chattel slavery, black workers were robbed. Under wage slavery, other workers are robbed. The Socialist Party says that this robbing shall cease. That no worker, black or white, shall be exploited for profit. And it says further that there is no one sure and certain way of putting an end to the system, and that is by working for the success of socialism. But before I tell you just how socialism proposes to this, let me say a word about the Civil War, which put an end to chattel slavery. Now, I know that certain people have taught you to believe that the Civil War was fought to free the slave, but it isn't true at all. And on it, very ignorant people hold that opinion non-a-date. If you will read the Emancipation Proclamation carefully, you will see that it wasn't for love of the slave that the slave were free. You will see that this was done as a fit and necessary word measure for suppressing said rebellion. If you will read Lincoln's letter to Harris Greeley, August 22nd, 1862, you will find this sentence: "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or destroy slavery. Now, I will tell you briefly how this struggle came about."
I guess that's for everyone else to read and find out how it came about. Yeah. I'll give my closing thoughts real quick. So my closing thoughts are, yes, you heard it right there. Slavery was not ended because of the Civil War. Slavery was a concession. I hope most of you know that already, that Lincoln did not free enslaved Africans because he cared about them. He did it because it was the political move to do. And overall, that's this lesson I think that we should take whenever we're looking at the so-called progress our people have obtained. Any type of showing that the national government has done, hey, we're going to do right by Black people, it's always been a concession. People think that the Civil Rights Act happened because the white people saw the people on the bridge getting beat up, and they're like, oh, we have to do something to help these people. No, if you actually look at the politics of what was happening at the time, America was getting hit really bad internationally. And the other countries at the United Nations were talking about how horrible America is. And so that international perception was the thing that made them change their policies. So that should be the lesson. Like I said, racism, capitalism, they don't destroy themselves. They'll only evolve, and they'll find an alternative way to achieve the same means. And I think that's what this chapter was really trying to get people to see. That's it for me.
Yeah, I think that, if we look back what happened if we study history and understand what happened during the 1800s leading up to the Civil War, it was a competition between the industrial North and the slave economy of the South, and the land that they just took from the Mexicans, the land that they acquired after the Haitian Revolution from France with the Louisiana Purchase. You had all of this land, and there was competition. There was a competitiveness that was in the United States over who was going to, how those lands were going to be occupied, whether they were going to be used for slavery or was it going to be free soil. And so the free soil, there was a party called the Free Soil Party who was absorbed by the Republican Party. But these were workers who felt that they could not compete with slave labor. There was people who wanted to control those lands to build tracks on, railroads across. And so, they weren't able to do that if those were going to be used for plantations. You need an extreme amount of land to use for cotton, for rice, and so forth. And so, that's what the fight was over. And the South just made a dumb political move because the North just didn't want slavery to expand. They were not looking to abolish slavery in the South. They just didn't want slavery to expand. And so because the South just felt so threatened by the institution and they wanted to expand slavery, that they decided to secede. They didn't want the North to have any say in the politics of the South. So, but, I can't wait to, pick back up with this book next week. And I think we had a great discussion today. Weekly roundups was very informative. Want to appreciate everybody for being on here and viewing us every week as we discuss these important topics and we examine colonialism and what we need to do. We know what we need to do, right? And so we need you to get involved as well. So if you're not a member, please find out, just email us at info@wechargecolonialism.org. Find out how you can get involved. We need writers. We need people, even if you may have busy schedules, even if you're just posting on social media, whatever way you can be active, we can meet you at your door. So please just get involved so we can bring about this transformation in this system as quickly as possible in our lifetime. So with that being said, I want to say peace out to everyone.